My new name now. Cool, we're going live in 2, 1, and let's go live. So, hello everyone, and welcome to the Academic Writing in Assessment Season livestream. Today delivered by myself, Alexander Wood, and Naomi Bowers-Joseph, who is here as well. I can't actually... So, we'll be talking all things academic writing that wouldn't necessarily be in the academic writing workshop, but we're going to target it towards the period of time that we are in and getting to at the moment, which is assessment season. So Naomi and I will be giving some tips for time management, for managing this particular time of year. We'll be answering 2 student questions, one about how you can use academic voice, and I'll be giving some examples through the power of hedging later on in the session. And so, yeah, we've got lots of time to discuss all those things and to answer any questions that you have yourself. So do let us know if you have any questions throughout the workshop, and we'll be keen to answer those as we go through.
Yes, we're both in the chat. I'm there as me, and Alex is in there as Derby Uni Library.
Yes.
So that's the pair of us in the chat as well. So do chuck questions in there, or comments, or general encouraging thoughts, or anything that you want to go in the chat.
So, the first thing that I think we should probably get straight to, because this is action-packed for the live stream, we've got so much content, I'm just like, we should move on as quickly as possible to get through as much as we could do, just like the academic writing workshop that we deliver. The first thing that I want to cover, and also the topic of the week this week, is a question that's been asked by a student, and that question is, I have 3 assignments due in for the same week, what should I do? So I was delivering an academic writing workshop a few weeks ago, and this question came up, and I did my best at the time to answer that, but I thought it'd be worth Naomi and I looking into what advice we could give to anyone else in that same position. So, let's get to the advice. So, Naomi, let's start with you. What advice would you give to this student?
Yes, so I've got 3 different pieces of advice dependent on how much time you've got before this week. So we know we've got 1 week where 3 assignments are due in. But I think how you approach this is going to differ depending on if that week is a long way away, if it's a medium way away, or if it's literally this week. So that's my 3 pieces of advice. So firstly, if it's a while away, if you're, say, you're sorting out your deadlines at the beginning of your module, you can see that coming up in 10 weeks' time, say, you've got this week where 3 assignments are due in. So in that situation, what I would do is I would give myself 3 different deadlines in different weeks, and then be really disciplined in sticking to them. So I would make sure that I knew that I was planning to complete my first essay by a certain point, and my second essay by another point, and my third essay by a final point, and treat those as much as I can as real deadlines, and sort it out that way. Alex, are you going to say something about you can chip in? I can see you wanting to chip in. Alex and I've worked together a long time now. I can see Alex's I want to chip in face.
Really? Do I have a face for that?
Yeah, of course you do. You always want to chip in though, so it's mainly
that is true. That is true. It goes back to what I talk about in the academic writing workshop about having a personal deadline, but this is particularly important when you have multiple deadlines due in. And so I just thought it'd be worth raising that. So it's not always about meeting the deadlines given to you. Something that you can do is you can adjust your own deadlines yourself to say, okay, instead of them all being for the same week, I might have some earlier, like Naomi was saying. So I think it's a really good piece of advice, Naomi. And I'll
Don't put them later.
No, you can't do that.
Don't make personal deadlines that are later.
No, definitely not. Unless you have the permission of your tutor, or you put in something like a late submission request. But they should only be done in emergencies, and you shouldn't plan to use those, especially with this problem. There's other ways of solving that.
I once had a gentleman friend who, his philosophy when driving was that he knew that the speed of the road, what the safe speed of the road was, better than the people that had put the speed limits in place. So sometimes that meant he would go slower than the speed limit, and sometimes that meant he would go faster than the speed limit. And he had this absolute certainty that he was right, and the council or whoever had put the speed limits in place was wrong. I disagreed with this. He is no longer a gentleman friend of mine. But yeah, so if you're going to put your own personal deadlines in, make sure they're earlier. You can't go to your tutor and say, but I gave myself a personal deadline of 2 weeks after the actual deadline.
Definitely. I feel like that segues quite nicely to one piece of my advice. Do you want me to say that now, or do you want to go through your piece?
Go for it.
So the only thing that I would recommend as a caveat to that is that as a student and as a recent graduate of the university, something that I did a few times when I had similar problems is I went directly to the lecturer and said, "Hi, I've got 3 deadlines in, or 2 deadlines in, both for the same day. Is it possible for you to adjust the deadline and move it slightly further backwards?" And sometimes those lecturers didn't realise, because they hadn't communicated effectively, particularly when you're doing things like joint honours, to realise actually the deadlines are on the same days. So it may be worth just mentioning it to them, because there sometimes is things they can do about that. And the worst thing they can say in that instant, if you do ask that question, is, well, no. So I was the program representative of my course, so I did that a few times, and I found success on some occasions, which was really helpful and helped everyone on my course. So if you aren't confident enough to go and ask that question yourself, you could go and see if you can find your program representative and ask them that question. I'm just going to go and get the link for where you can find your information about your program rep, in case you don't know who they are, and you can see if they could ask the question, or alternatively you could ask it yourself to see if it is possible, because the lecturers are trying to help you pass, so they aren't here to help you fail. So unless they have other reasons, they may be willing to move your deadline. And the key word there is may. So it's always worth asking the question if there's lots of deadlines in and it's an issue for everyone on your course. Cool. That's my piece of advice that fits in there. So Naomi, would you like to continue now, either comment on that or to go through your moderate amount of time?
Yes, so my next piece of advice for it is if you have like a medium amount of time. So you're not looking at it from far away and thinking, oh, that's ages away, but equally it's not this week. So you've got a few weeks maybe. Make the best use you can of time-saving techniques. So make the most efficient use of your time as you can. So this might be things like do your references as you go along. We recommend this anyway when we talk about referencing. But when you're short on time, the last thing you want to be doing is staying up all night the last night before your deadline and trying to sort out your reference list. So write your reference list as you go along. Make sure you're referencing in text, doing a citing in text, and doing your reference list as you go along, because that will really help you out when it comes to that crunch point when you've got all these deadlines at the same time. And also proofread sections at a time as you go. So we recommend proofreading your work, maybe not the day you've written it, have a bit of a break, but you can proofread sections at a time as you go along. You don't need to proofread your whole document all at once. And that will mean that, again, you're not last minute trying to proofread 3 essays all at once. Make a plan for each of your assessments. So writing a plan for your essay, if it's an essay or a report, or however that's going to work, it's always a really good idea, but really important if you've got these tight deadlines all at the same time. And plot out how much time you're going to allocate yourself for each section. So on your plan, you can put time allocations. In fact, when we have our live stream plans, and we put allocations of time, how long we want to spend talking about each part, and we just do that in a table. We have a table, we have a column for this is what we're going to say, and we have a column that says this is how long we're going to spend taking it. So take that kind of approach. That can really help you to make the best use of the time that you've got. And if you are still at your reading stage, be strategic with your reading. So using the search function, for example. So if you're reading an ebook or an e-journal, those are wonderful because you can use a search function to pick out keywords. So you're really focusing the reading that you're doing on things that are most likely to be useful. So if you've got a book in front of you, don't start reading the book cover to cover. Really focus in. If it's a print book, you can look in the index. You can look, see where your different topics come up in the index. Refer yourself back to those pages. Be strategic with what you're reading, and that will also it's about efficiency at this point in the process. And then my final point is, if it's last minute, if it's this week, say, or next week, you've got 3 deadlines due in this week or next week, it's really last minute, you need to be thinking about how you can best maximize your marks. So it's likely, and this will, I'm going to put a caveat in here, it will depend on your course, on the way they're marked, on all manner of other things, but it's likely that you are going to get more marks overall from 3 assessments that are okay, rather than 1 that's absolutely brilliant and 2 that haven't been finished. So you need to think about, you need to look at the marks, how those marks interact with each other, and really understand how it's being marked. So many courses, if you hand in late, you'll be capped at 40%. So you need to take that into account. So you're probably going to get more marks overall than from 3 completed assessments that are all in on time, rather than one that's absolutely stunning but 2 that are in late. That's my advice, and that leads on to your next point, doesn't it, Alex?
Cool. Just remember to unmute myself on the live stream. Yes, definitely. And I would just echo that point as well. I always aim when I produce work to make sure that work is to a very good standard rather than perfect, to make sure I have time to do as much as I can do. And the reason for that is because the higher the percentage mark, the more effort it takes to go up one mark. So the difference between 80 and 85, for example, could be a lot more work than the difference between a 60 and a 70, or a 40 and a 50. And so it's worth considering where you invest your time, to try and, as Naomi said, make sure you get 3 that are done to a good standard or a very good standard, rather than having some that are unfinished. It's also worth, on that note, to consider the weighting of those assessments in terms of how much time you want to put into them. Some assessments may be weighted and may have more impact on your grade than others. So, for example, if one of them is worth 20% of your module grade, but another one is worth 50% of a module grade, the one that's worth 50%, if you do better on that will impact you more. So it's about working out what you should prioritise on that angle as well. So thinking about what can help me be most efficient with the time I have to get the marks that I need to get. I would always recommend putting your full into everything, but if you have to choose, you can prioritise. So I remember there was some assessments that I had that were pass-fail on my most recent course that I'm currently on. And so with those, I knew that the standard I need to achieve was far less. So there was 2 exams same day. So I had the similar conundrum to this. How do I get the most out of those? So I tried to do what I could do to get myself the pass mark. Whereas if I had gone all out and done everything I needed to, I would still only got a pass. So I then prioritised the other work that was not pass-fail. It was graded out of 100, just on a similar mark scheme to the postgraduate scheme of marks elsewhere. So that was always worth having a look at and working out how you can prioritise that time. So do spend a little bit of time, not too much if you're short for time, but just a little bit of time strategically planning how to get the most out of your time.
I do think it's worth being strategic about it, because if you don't, the temptation always is, and I have absolutely fallen into this myself, is to spend more time on the one that you're enjoying the most or not enjoying the least. It's so tempting to focus on the topic that interests you the most, or the style of assessment that you get on with the most. I love exams. I hate writing essays. I love exams. So my temptation is always to throw myself into the exams and then neglect the essays. And that works to some extent, and it's good to follow the things you enjoy and your passions. But in this kind of situation, we've got competing deadlines and competing assessments, it's worth taking that step back and seeing actually where is it best to focus my time.
Definitely. It's interesting how we have different learning styles though, because I do the opposite. It tends to be the modules that I enjoy the least that I do the best on. And I think that's because of the way I work. So if I feel like something is a challenge, I will invest time on that as a priority. So I remember I studied a complicated area of law, which I think was EU law, that I knew nothing about. And then I had another area of law that I'd studied before. And so I thought, actually, I'm going to prioritise the area that's billed as the hard one and put less time on the one that's meant to be easier. And then actually, because I spent the time on it, I got a better mark. So I'm the opposite of you. It's interesting to note the different learning styles there that we have. Same goes to assessments and presentations. I put less effort into presentation assessments, which I enjoy more, than writing essays, because I think it's about which one intimidates me the most. And then, so that's how I work by comparison. So, Naomi said about doing work on multiple assessments then, and I also think it is worth starting each assessment that you have so that they're at least at a starting point. So instead of starting one, working on it, finishing it, starting another one, working on it, finishing it, even with those personal deadlines that we mentioned before, I would still recommend having multiple assessments on the go at once, even if it means just getting the starting steps done for one of your assessments. Because once you've started to understand that assessment, and think about it, one, you'll be less scared about it because you'll have a better understanding of what you need to do and better planning for that assessment. Two, you can then, if you have any ideas whilst you're working on something, your brain will have time to actually think about the problem, and any relevant reading or resources or ideas, you can just note them down somewhere, which will then help you out later on. Whereas if you have no idea what the assessment is, you may just sit there thinking, you may sit there not using that time as an opportunity that you have, and you're not therefore using your time as efficiently as you could do. Something that I find useful to do is, if I'm working very hard on one assessment, sometimes I can get fatigued from that assessment, so I may think my brain's stuck on this, and so I may then enjoy more switching assessments to a new challenge.
Yeah.
So instead of focusing on the same challenge, I'm focusing on a new challenge instead, which then helps me to become more productive.
A change is as good as a rest.
What did you say?
A change is as good as a rest.
Definitely.
So you do need to rest as well.
Yes. Definitely in this situation, rest, relax, still spend time socialising. Even if it's less time than before, it's still vitally important to have that time. But changing what you do and what you work on is also another important thing that can help you within this troubled time of assessment season. Okay, so those are all my pieces of advice, except for one that I mentioned very, very briefly earlier, which was about a last resort, basically, of what you can do if you're genuinely struggling in the assessment period when you have multiple deadlines or there's other factors that are affecting you. And that is something called the late submission procedure, or there is also the extenuating external extenuating?
Exceptional extenuating circumstances.
There you go. It's a mouthful. So there's two different procedures. One's called EEC, and the other's about late submission. And what you can use them for is to extend your deadlines. They are not necessarily the easiest thing to do and to achieve and to get, and you do need some external factors going on. But if you genuinely are struggling for time, because of the multiple deadlines and maybe some other factors going on as well, the university could take that in consideration when they are marking it. I'm not saying they necessarily will though, but it's still worth looking into if you're genuinely really struggling. So I'll just share my screen and show you where you can find the process. I'm just going to log into Udoo first, so that's not on the live stream, with my student number. Okay, I'm logged in as StaffMe. Nope, StaffMe doesn't work. Technical difficulties whilst I just log out and log back in as StudentMe.
It's very complicated being... Alex has many plates. Alex has many hats. Alex has a staff hat and a student hat and many other different hats in various aspects of his life. And it's difficult to make the computer understand this, I think.
Whoops, I have my screen capture set up for the wrong screen. 2 moments whilst I just go and fix that. I just showed OBS temporarily. So I want left display. Oh.
Maybe if this isn't going to work, we should...
this isn't going to work because they're doing maintenance on Udoo. Basically, on Udoo, there is a tab where you can find information about... how to... do late submission requests. It's all through Udoo, information about those, which I would recommend looking into, and I'll put a link into... I don't know if I can actually link into Udoo, so I'll put instructions in the description once Udoo's come back active tomorrow. So yeah, apologies for that. I did not realise Udoo was down today. I'll call it Udoo, it's Udo. Anyways,
I call it Udoo. I call it Udoo.
I don't know why we call it Udoo.
It sounds like so positive. You do things.
Oh, someone called it Udo, and I was like, that makes sense. I didn't think about it like that. But now that I'm screen sharing anyways, what I'll do is I'm going to show you where you can find our resources for academic writing. So that concludes our advice for academic writing in assessment season, particularly time managing. But we'll talk about some further advice about time managing just after I show you some resources for academic writing. Naomi, do you have anything you want to add on that point beforehand, though?
I don't. Are you screen sharing at the moment?
No,
Or
I am now though.
me?
I've just clicked screen
Ah,
share. Okay,
wonderful.
so I'm now on the library homepage, and what I'll do is I'll show you where you can find our new academic writing resources that you may find useful, as well as where you can find all of our other academic writing resources as well. And you can do so from the library homepage, which you can find through Udo. I won't show you that now though. Or you can find it through the main University of Derby website, or you could find it through Googling University of Derby Library. Once you've got to the library website, you can go to the support tab at the top left, and then click on scroll down to skills guides, and once you click skills guides, you'll be presented with our information about all of our different guide topics, including critical thinking and reading, which is relevant to academic writing, types of assessment with information about different types of assessment, and also academic writing and referencing, which is the one I'll show you now. So inside each guide hub, there are multiple different guide categories. I mentioned earlier about making sure you understand the marking criteria, understand the questions. You can do so and get some information about that through our Meeting the Marking Criteria guide. But the guide I'd like to show you now is our latest guide, which is the Grammar Skills Guide, which has been made with students who are our grammar content creators who came in and helped us with this guide. So this guide contains lots of information about how you can use grammar correctly in your work, which is aimed at helping you to be a bit more confident when using grammar. So the guide, no one can ever see that you've used this if you are concerned about grammar, but I always know that it's worth checking grammar rules, because sometimes, although you think you're confident, it's sometimes worth going back and just checking. So we've produced this guide from a beginner's perspective, but also contains some advice, some grammar techniques that you could use in academic writing to make it sound more effective. So there are instructions on capitalization, proper nouns, and so on, and how you when you capitalize. There are guides on sentence types that you can use in your writing, as well as some videos. There's guides on hedges, which include what I'm going to be talking about later today. So later on, I'm going to be talking about how you can use hedges in your academic writing, and all these other topics that you can have a look through, and how you can use grammar in different contexts. So I would recommend having a look through that guide. It has been well created by students, and I'll be honest, I did have a look through it myself to help make sure I was doing grammar right. So I would also recommend doing that, even if you feel slightly confident about grammar. I'd still just double check. But yeah, Naomi, have you got anything to say about the grammar guide that I'm currently on?
No, other than it's wonderful. And as Alex was saying, it was created by two of our students. It was a really good project that we did over the summer, and yeah, it's great.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Naomi. So now, Naomi, we are back on the main camera, so people can see
hello.
our faces again, and no longer can they see the screen. And now we're going to talk about and share our advice for organising our time in the tough period of time that is assessment season. So we're now on to the 2nd of November 2021, and it's really, I think, the point when it gets to November is the turning point of the semester, where it goes from basically being welcome to university, we're getting used to it, to now you're in the nitty gritty of getting through your assessments. So assessments should have started for you, and they'll be coming thick and fast throughout the next couple of weeks. So we thought we'd share our advice about time managing in this tough period of time. So I'll start with you, Naomi.
Yes, deadlines might not necessarily be coming now, will they?
Some
I mean,
deadlines.
some might, but...
Depends on your course, but unless you've got the tough course where they're all on the same day at the end of the semester, which I always prefer to have them just mixed in every couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But yes, definitely.
So yes, my top tips for this point in the semester, and like Alex said, it's a really interesting point in the semester, particularly if you're first year and you've just started, but any year really. You've come back and you've done your settling in, and now you're working. Obviously, if you're a January starter, then it'll be different timings, but still, I think the points stand. So it's a really good time to take a look back at how things have gone so far, and make yourself an action plan for the rest of the semester. Now, I talk a lot about reflection. I love reflection. I think reflection is a wonderful thing. And we do have a skills guide on reflection that's available on our website. And one of the resources we have in that is a reflective action plan that you can download. It's just a Word document that you can download and fill out, but it will guide you through making a reflective action plan. So that might be something to do, that will really help you set some action points, some goals, reflect back on whether you've met them or not, and it works in a loop. So you look backwards in reflection, you ask yourself some critical questions about what's happened so far, you put an action point in for the future, and then when you reflect on that action point later. So it loops round. So that's a really good idea to do, because this is a point where you've got enough experience that it's worth reflecting on. And you've also got enough time going forward that it's worth putting together an action plan. So it's a really good time to do that. The next top tip I would say is ask yourself the question, do you know how each of your modules is going to be assessed and what the relevant dates are? So make sure that you are aware for each module you've got, because each module will be assessed in some way, whether it's formative or summative, or however that assessment works, whether it's an informal assessment or a mark that goes towards your final degree, however that works, there will be some kind of assessment. So do you know what that's going to be, and when its deadline is, when its exam is, what relevant dates are there? And if you don't, find that out. So that might be checking back through your module handbook, through the course information on course resources, or asking your lecturer. And finally, and this could go back into the idea of reflection as well, take a look at your work-life balance. So are you happy with how things are sitting, and do you need to rebalance that at all? So certainly when you first start at university, it can be difficult to find your feet with regards to that balance between working and I was going to say living, when the work-life balance between socializing, relaxing, not working, and studying, and you may need to think about your paid work commitments, all those sorts of things. And it can be really useful to just take a look at that, and you might find it useful. Maybe take a week and plan out or note down what you're doing at different points. If you color code it, if you're a color coding kind of person, you can maybe put different colors for study, for paid work, for relaxing time, maybe 3 different colors. And then after that week's finished, you can look back and literally visually see the balance of your week. So that can be a really helpful thing to do, because everyone's different. Everyone will lean more towards one of those different aspects. So it's worth looking back and saying, is this a balance that's working for you? Is it working for you in terms of your study? Is it working for you in terms of how you're feeling? Is it working for you in terms of your finances? Those are all going to be relevant questions to ask yourself, and this is a really good time to do that.
I just want to add just that colour coding point about how useful I think it is. My partner was completing a dissertation, and she was working alongside doing it. She was doing other voluntary things as well, and so I challenged her to use her colour coding system to be able to look at a glance every week to see how much time she was putting on her dissertation. And then she looked back and realised, actually, I'm not, on my current way of working, I'm not actually spending enough time on it to get it done. If I continue the amount of time I'm able to prioritise it with, because other things get put in the way at times, especially when it's on your own work and when it's less supervised than a normal module where you've got classes every week and so on, and you've got working alongside it. So that colour coding system can be a way of realising, actually, maybe I'm not spending enough time on it, and if you figure that's the case out, you can then say, okay, now I want to show the next few weeks that I am prioritising this task, and then when I look back at this next week, I will have more time of this colour in my diary. And then you can look back at the next week, has that happened? If not, what can you then do? If it has, great, keep it up. And so I think it's really useful as a method. Naomi mentioned using a calendar system. I do that too, but I think it's also worth adding all those dates of all your deadlines and your personal deadlines to your calendar. I think that reminders can be quite effective, particularly to your phone, only if you actually look at them and don't have too many though. So I have a reminder for my assessment, and I will say, okay, here's a deadline. I'm going to remind myself 7 days before it. I'm going to remind myself 2 weeks before it, 3 weeks before it, and then like a month before it, for example, I may get a notification, and then I'm like, oh, I need to start work on this. And so by doing that, it can remind you of the things that are coming up that you need to start work on. I will be honest, it's not always the best feeling when you're in the middle of something and you get a notification coming through saying, by the way, in a month, this other thing is due that you've not started yet, but it can be a wake-up call that you need to get going with the thing you're working on now so that you can make sure that you can finish your next project in for the deadline. So I think that's quite an effective technique. Do you have anything to add about that, Naomi, or do you want me to continue on?
No, you carry on.
Cool. So that being scared when you realise something is coming, hopefully will happen earlier if you use a technique that I use to manage my time called backwards planning. I talk about it a lot in my academic writing workshop. I just basically go over it now, and I'll link a video in the once I finish talking. Actually, I don't stop talking. Oh, you talk once. Next time you talk, I'll link a video about backwards planning. Actually, it's your backwards planning video anyways. But backwards planning basically is looking backwards from the date of the deadline and working out when you need to start work on it based on how long you think each step will take. And by deadline, I of course mean your personal deadline, not the actual one, because that's when you want to finish it by. And think about how long each step would be. So how long is it going to take to reference? How long is it going to take to proofread? How long do you think it'll take to write? And by doing that, you can work out, actually, this is when I need to start and not leave it too late. So then you don't get a reminder 4 weeks before the deadline saying, by the way, you need to do this. You'll already know and be aware earlier that you need to start work on it and when the ideal time is under the way that you work. I would always be generous with the amount of time it takes, but then when you're in assessment season, when you've got multiple things, sometimes it's worth prioritising and being more efficient and spending longer on ones like we discussed earlier. But just having a general plan could be good, but don't be afraid of adapting that plan throughout your assessment. Cool. So the next piece of advice that I have is actually one that I mentioned earlier, which is just to reiterate the fact that you don't have to work on everything till you complete it. You can switch tasks throughout when you are time managing. But I came up early because I was thinking about something else, and I was like, it's a good piece of advice. And I realised on my plan I'd scheduled it to be said here. Doesn't really matter. And if I was a proper show like live streamer, I probably wouldn't have mentioned that. Anyways, that is how I would manage my time at this point in the semester. But now we're going to talk about more generally, how you would manage your time. So, more generally, and throughout the semester, I would of course use a calendar. Naomi mentioned that she uses Google Calendar. I use Google Calendar as well, but there are other calendar apps available, such as Outlook. Students have a calendar through that online, and you have free use of that through Udo when Udo is operating. Or you can download it from Udo so that you can access on your desktop without having to rely on Udo being online. So in that calendar system, I use a traffic light system to work out my availability generally for actually doing work. So there are a few ways that I do my calendar. First of all, I will colour code it based on what different organisation I'm working for. So for example, I have my paid work, I've got my voluntary work, and I have my studying. So I will colour code each one of those a different colour and each subgroup in those. But then within those, I will mark them as movable, not movable. It needs to be done, but I can move it. And I'll thirdly mark it as it can't be moved. So I'll start prioritising the work that I need to do for my assessments as amber, because that needs to be done, but it can be adjusted. But if it is adjusted, I'll need to move it within the same week. And I think that tends to work for me in terms of getting things done, although I think it's a good way of visualising basically what you can fit in, and to also make sure you can put in the things that are more flexible. So the things that are flexible, you can plan them in to get them done. And if you get them done quicker than you thought so in your calendar, you can just delete them and put something else in. But yeah, I think that's a good way of planning my time. Naomi, how do you plan your time in contrast to that in terms of just on your calendar? Is there any differences or similarities?
I use two different calendars. I have an Outlook calendar for work, and I use a Google calendar for my personal stuff that's on my phone. I'm not really a colour coder, in all honesty. I don't find that useful. On my Google calendar now, if I start putting locations in, it puts little pictures of where I'm going. That's all quite. I like that. I don't know if it helps me organise myself at all, but I like it. It's aesthetically pleasing.
Well, I find it does actually, because I do the same. But if you put locations in, it means that you don't have to find them in the moment. You can just literally, on the day, just click on Google Maps and it navigates you there, which I think is great.
knows. It talks to Google Calendar. It's amazing. So easily impressed. So I do that. I don't like to mix the two. So I do like to keep my personal calendar separate from my work calendar. The problem with that is then if the two do impact on each other, then it can get a bit confusing. So I need to make sure that I do actively put in if I'm going to work different hours to normal or something like that. But I like to keep those separate because that works better for my head.
Well, another feature that I think is worth mentioning with Google Calendar that is useful, as well as the one that we were just discussing, is the fact that you can view other people's calendars on it. So
only if they let you.
Only if they let you, and you let them as well. So I have my calendar shared with my partner, so I can see when she's busy, and that helps me to manage my time. So, for example, I may choose to do my master's reading at a time when she's in a meeting, and then both of us can then have the same time to socialise, and that's a good way of planning time out, using calendars, without having to say to her, when are you free, when are you not, which I think is very effective. So that's one feature. You can also then help to plan events by having people's calendars, but I'd only recommend doing it with people that you're quite close with. On Outlook at work, we have the ability to see other people's calendars. That's really useful, but I don't think students have that ability. But with your friends on your course, you could always just ask them when they're available if you're doing group work and things. But we have more targeted advice to time management in group work on our group work live stream that came out last year and was a long time ago. Cool. So the other things I'd make sure to do with my calendar and my calendar system, as I mentioned earlier, is to block out time for socialization. So sometimes something that I...
Can I interrupt right at the beginning here?
Interrupt me right at the beginning here.
Can we say relaxing rather than socialization?
That's
because
true.
I am a proper introvert, and socialization, I do it and I enjoy it, but I don't find it relaxing. I don't find it... it doesn't recharge me. It stresses me out. So whatever that relaxing and that downtime looks like to you.
I think that's a better way of describing what I do anyways. So yes, I plan time for relaxing and for effectively me time, whether me time is just to spend time with others, if that's what you enjoy doing, or not. So yeah, I think that's effective. So I prefer to have a routine personally, so I like to have things that are fixed and blocked. So I, at the same time every week, do the same things. I think that works. But I'm not afraid of adapting that. So for example, I try to regularly play tennis as some form of physical activity that I do. But if I have deadlines coming up, like I had a deadline coming up last week and I've got one this week, I may say, okay, I want to play tennis still, but instead of playing 3 times a week, I might play twice a week or once a week. But I still make sure I do something for me in that time to make sure I am still somewhat like okay and happy, because by giving yourself a break to do things like that, you can sometimes find that you are working better. And we talk about it a lot, but for example, going for a walk, you may end up actually processing a lot of information and finding yourself in a better position to do good work. The other thing that I find to do with planning my time, which I think may be useful, is planning specific hours in for studying. It's particularly useful for me because of the fact that I work and study at the same time, so I will plan to say work for an hour in the morning, so I might get up an hour early and then regularly do an hour before work of reading or work to make sure I can get things done. Alternatively, I could do an hour in the evening. I'd probably say more than 2 hours a day for master's level at the level that I'm doing is needed, but by just planning them in and making them a regular occurrence and fixture of my life, it doesn't feel like I'm doing that much work because I'm in a routine of it, and then it feels okay. Whereas if it was just 3 hours of work some days, no work other days, I think it would be more difficult. And something that I read when I was researching for the academic voice section about hedging, and trying to pick a topic for that, was about how you should write someone recommend to improve your writing at master's levels to write every day. And so I'm trying to get myself into a routine like that of reading and writing every day to try and get myself better at it. So yeah, that's what I do, and that's my advice for organising my time. And now I shall let Naomi describe your advice about how you organise your time. And once you do that, I'll go and see if I can find that video. What video was it that I was going to find? Because I've completely forgotten. Backwards planning. Thank you. Cool. Yeah, I shall find that.
I'd just like to say first off, I have never been in a place in my life where I have had like a main activity for the day, like a day's work, and I thought, I'll do an hour of studying beforehand. That's never happened to me.
I just like to add on
I
that
see
point.
Alex always wants to chip in. That's
I just
Alex's
like to
default
add
state.
on that point that if I didn't do that, I would have no weekends because I'm doing full-time work and part-time masters. So I couldn't do the work I need to do if I didn't do that. So it's not that I really have much choice. It's I do that or I fail. So it's trying to make sure I can do the things I need to do. And if I thought that's too much of myself, then I'd probably withdraw or change how I study and things like that and adapt my life accordingly. If I could do. I also aren't in the same position as you, just to let you know. Naomi and I have different considerations. You have children to look after. I don't, so I have slightly more time to then focus out and relax outside of work. So we're in different circumstances, aren't we?
To be fair, before I started work this morning, I did have to convince a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old to get ready for the day, do a nursery run with one of them, come home, and then do a school run with the other one. So that probably took me more than an hour, to be fair.
And in the same period of time, I read some papers. So it's, it swings and roundabouts. It's like, well, why can I find this time? Well, because I'm in different circumstances to you. So it's always worth noting that if you are in people will have different things going on in their lives to manage around.
Yeah. It's this thing where people say you have the same number of hours of the day as Beyonce. Beyonce has many people to help her. She is in a different situation. Nobody should be holding themselves up to compare themselves to Beyonce, just generally. And that's my profound piece of advice for the live stream. Don't try and compare yourself to Beyonce. So I've got 2 more things just about how I personally organise my time. So like I said before, I've got these 2 calendars that I balance. I do also have
I've got my essay
large
written.
wall planner. It's one of these ones that it's white down, so it can be any month. I don't use that all the time, but I use it for particularly complicated times when I know I'm going to get confused. So I have it on the wall by the door, so it's really large and in my face, essentially. So I use that as well. And the key thing that I try to do in both my work and my personal life is it's this awareness of deadlines. It's knowing. I always find knowing what's going on and what's expected of me is so helpful because it does let you prioritize. And again, my tendency, if there's something that I'm worried about or that I don't want to do, my inclination is to pretend it's not happening. I had a friend when I was studying who had a deadline at Christmas, and she'd got a chocolate advent calendar, and she wouldn't eat the chocolates. So her logic was, if she didn't have the chocolate for the 3rd of December, then that day hadn't passed. That was not hugely successful as a strategy, because the days, of course, were passing, and just not eating the chocolates on the advent calendar was not going to stop the time from passing. But it's a really tempting thing to think about. If I don't think about that deadline, it's not going to happen. So being aware of those deadlines, knowing what they are, is always going to stand you in better stead than pretending they're not coming, essentially, and prioritize on that basis.
I was just going to say 100%. You've got to be aware of them, and putting them off actually probably increases stress over time, because the amount of days you have to do that piece of work will decrease, and so therefore you have to do more work per day. And so if you ever find yourself in a position where you feel like, I've been doing this and almost denying that I have this deadline for a while, although the best time to start may have been last week or a few weeks ago, the second best time to start from the position you're in now, or the best time to start in the position you're in now, was today. So even if you have denied that existence, which does happen, sometimes you may sit in a task for too long and go, oh, I wish I could have done that. You've just got to be bold and go, you know what, I've made a mistake, but I'm going to start working on it now and do the best I can. Because if you then stress about not starting for another week, that's another week that's gone. And so just start on it. And often once you've started on something, things flow a lot better and work a lot better. And so yeah, I'd recommend just getting ahead and starting with it if you could do. Cool. Do you have anything further to add, Naomi?
No, I don't. And Alex, you're going to talk next about hedging. I've got to go at 11. So if I suddenly disappear at 11, it's because I've gone. If I suddenly disappear, it's because I've disappeared. But yes. But we have had a question in the chat. I can do just coming through about tools and tips to quickly discuss and critically analyze. I'll put the link to our critical thinking guide, critical reading and writing. I forget what it's called. I'll find the guide and I'll pop the link in whilst Alex is talking to his next bit.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Naomi. Sorry, I didn't see the question because I have just put the PowerPoint on my screen, which had the YouTube chat open, which then means that I can't always see. Ooh, let me just remove the bottom line, bottom of the screen bar that I have on. There we go. So I'm now going to talk about hedging in academic writing. So what I've been asked to look at by some student requests that I didn't really know too much about recently is something called academic voice, which is about basically learning to put your own voice into your writing and to find your own writing style to an extent. It's a bit more complicated than that, but I won't go into too much detail about it. But I've been reading about that, and so one aspect of getting academic voice in writing is something called hedging. What hedging is effectively it's almost explaining the level of certainty or expressing the level of certainty within the writing that you do. So when you say a statement, you are almost pointing out the flaws with it, the weaknesses, and you can do that using academic language. So it means that instead of just stating something as fact, you can make sure people understand that fact to more of a logical extent, and you can almost examine and say, whilst I still rely on this, here are maybe some things that are worth considering with this information, so that your claims aren't just easily pushed aside or brushed aside and dismissed. Because you can then acknowledge the flaws with it, but say, however. So it's worth doing, and to exemplify what it is, here are two different sentences that I have written. So the first one does not contain any hedging. They're both on the same point, and they're both about listening to podcasts, and they're both completely fictional. I've made these up, which is why I put my own name in them. I also didn't reference them properly. There should be a comma afterward, so apologies for that. The citation is incorrect, so I should check that right for that one. So, which is always the point about proofreading any of your references. So the first one says, listening to academic podcasts daily helps students to improve their listening skills in lectures. That is a claim. And on that basis of me putting that into my work, that seems like it just is. It's a fact. It does. And that has come from the source Wood 2019. However, if I was to use hedges in my writing, I would express the level of certainty with that claim. So this is an example where I've used a lot of hedging to make it quite clear, but there's different levels you can do this to, and here I've used quite a lot of them. So first of all, I've said, research completed by Wood 2019 suggests that listening to academic podcasts may support the development of students' listening skills. So the key words that I've used here are may in this fact. So instead of saying it does, I've said it may help them. And then I've looked into some underpinning factors that may influence that study. So Wood's research involved first year students aged 18 and 19 who completed A-levels before starting university. But the students may be comparable. Oh, I really should have proofread this. So here I've put in two limitations already. With this, I've put the fact that it involves first year students only. Three limitations: the year of the students, the fact their ages, and the fact that they've come from the same background. Which again may influence the study. It may not. It may be worth asking questions about whether that would be the same if someone who is a mature student, for example, in their second year was to listen to a podcast, would they have the same outcome? And that's where potentially there may be a need for further research, or looking for other studies of similar things. So I then said about where the students have been recruited from, which is again looking at the methodology of the research that I found. The study recruited volunteers from study skills workshops, and so may be biased by students who are already actively participating in learning. So by using hedges, I have explained what the flaws are with the argument that I'm relying on. I'm still relying on the argument, but I'm pointing out that here are some things that people make considerations of. When you do this, it can effectively make it so your work is more academic and accept some weaknesses in arguments. You can then, if you choose to, counter those weaknesses to explain why it's still worth relying on it. So A big weakness here is the fact that it's for first year students, but they still may compare to other students, and it's for 18 and 19-year-olds. If there are not much research done in this area, then this could be a good starting point, and you could indicate the need for further research. If there's other research in the area, you could then use that further research. So I've then said in the paragraph that this work is supported by other sources, and then would go on to then say what those sources are and how they affect the reliability of the argument that's being made. But by doing this, you add another level of academic writing to your work, particularly around things that are key to your argument. So I wouldn't recommend doing this maybe for everything, but if you do it for things that are key, or key evidence that you're relying on, that may be more useful to your academic writing. So, now I'd like to talk about some different examples of words that you could use for suggesting the level of certainty with a source. And the first set are adapted from a book called, I think it's called Successful Academic Writing, but I've got a link to it on the last slide, which is from Gillett 2009, which is available as an ebook that you may find useful to have a look at. It contains a chapter on academic voice that I think was particularly useful, and I'd recommend having a look at if you want to further understand academic voice and how you can incorporate academic voice into your writing. So, the first way that you could include indications of certainty are modal verbs. You could then decide to use something that's confident. So you could say, this will. Alternatively, you could say, this may. You could say, this might, or could. So you can choose whichever level of confidence you feel in the statement, which would indicate the level of certainty you feel with that statement. So that is a choice that you can use to display confidence in your level of certainty with that argument. The next thing that you could look at is modal adverbs. So these are other words that would help you to describe the certainty of your term. So certainly would suggest confidence that this means that almost certainly. Well, not almost certainly, certainly. I say almost because I always put hedges into how I speak. Definitely, again, a certain term. Probably suggests that it likely does, perhaps suggests that it could do, and possibly means that it may do, and you may be able to use this as a possibility, although it may not be overly likely. Again, this could allow your reader to understand that you understand the reliability of the sources and arguments that you're making, and ascertain that some things aren't or are definite. So these things can be used quite well. You could turn those into adjectives using certain and definite, which are basically the same, but in different ways of saying them and displaying them. And you could also use certain phrases, such as signalling phrases, to make it in your essay to make it clear how certain you are. So you could say it may be possible, it could be, there's a chance that, or alternatively there's a strong likelihood that. Even strong likelihood does not mean definite. So again, consider the use of language and make sure you understand those terms. So, other things you could do is how you describe how many people are in support of something, or how many people are influenced by something. So I could say, well, a fraction of students find listening to podcasts helpful. That would indicate a small amount. I could say a majority of students do. But I need to make sure I'm using the right language to describe the certainty of the work and research that I've done and my findings. Other things that you could use for hedging are introductory verbs, such as it appears that, which suggests that it looks like this, but it may not be. So further research may be needed. It seems that, it looks like, it is believed that, and then you could explain the origin of the evidence. And again, these describe the level that whilst the research is out there and academics have written about this evidence, there may be some uncertainty in their writing, and that it means that they aren't necessarily definitely correct. And there are also clauses that you could use called that clauses, which are a way of also adding in hedging into your work. I won't read all of them, but I'll use some examples. It may be suggested that shows that this is a suggestion, it's just not necessarily the exact thing. It could be the case that, and so on. So that phrase is, again, another way to add a level of certainty or uncertainty to your writing to make it clear what the true level is. So this has been adapted from a book called Gillet, which is Successful Academic Writing. I'll show you where you can access that on Library Plus now. The link doesn't work. I'll show you how you can find that book now then, since the link didn't work. It worked this morning, but it's probably because I've logged out since. So you can find that by going to the library catalogue and searching for the book, which, if I just type in Academic Voice, it is fairly close to the top. So it is a book called Successful Academic Writing by Gillet, and you can access that as a ebook at the moment, and also as a paperback book in the library. These are subject to change because books come and go in our catalogue, but this is currently available as an ebook. And you can open it through this resource here at the moment. So that is a book I'd recommend. They have a really good section, if I just get it up. They have a really good section on academic voice called Finding Your Own Voice, which you may find useful for further development in this area. Okay, so that was the topic, and I'll put the name of the book in the chat. But for now, I'm just going to switch my screen. But yeah, does anyone have any further questions about that or about this workshop that they would like us to answer in the next few minutes? And Naomi, have you been able to send the link into the chat?
I did. It doesn't appear as a link when I do it, but I have put the link in for the critical reading and thinking skills guide, and also the As a Student podcast on thinking critically.
We had this in the past. I think
it
it may be my settings, because you're not me. You're not Derby Union Library, so it may be because of that.
Alex.
It may be because you've not got the ability to send links into the chat. That might be a thing. So do you want to message me them on Teams, and I can just put the same links across?
Well, they're there in the chat.
I can't see the chat. They're not there. They have not sent. So they're not in there. I think it's because you're sending a link.
Can't see them at all?
Yeah, I think I might have to make you a moderator or something like that for it to work, but I'm not sure. So apologies for those not coming through. But yeah, if anyone has any further questions, we can answer them. Thank you for sending me on Teams. I'll just copy those across now.
That's interesting, because everything else I write in the chat appears, doesn't it?
Yes, but not links.
I send the links. It looks to me like I've sent the link in the chat. It doesn't tell me it's not done it before.
Have you sent any other links so far during the live stream?
No, I don't think so.
Cool. I reckon it's to stop people from sending links in the chat that are malicious.
Yes. Well, apologies to the person who asked that question. Like I said, I did respond really quite promptly, but YouTube has turned against me.
Cool. So yeah, hopefully you find that stuff about hedging quite useful. It's definitely worth looking into further, and there are lots of online articles that you can look into about hedging. It's an interesting topic because it seems odd to also sometimes negate the certainty of something that you've looked into, but it's showing that you understand basically how certain things are, and it's an opportunity for you to say, here's a weakness, but here's how I'd counter that weakness. So I do think it's quite a useful skill to have. Okay, so yeah, I don't think I have anything further. Does anyone have any questions that they would like us to go through in the next couple of minutes? Naomi's going to have to go.
I'm going to wave goodbye.
Okay, goodbye Naomi, and thank you very much for your help in the live stream today. And also, this is your last live stream for a while, isn't it? I don't think everyone heard you at the start because not everyone was here.
It is my last live stream for a while. I'm about to go on maternity leave, so it won't be me live streaming for a good little while. But I will endeavour to, I'll come on and watch if I can see them, and obviously if I've not got a baby screaming at me, or indeed any other children, or anyone else generally screaming at me. But yes, so thank you everybody for being here. I enjoy doing the live streams, and I will miss them. And I will be back when I'm off maternity leave.
Yes, definitely. And yeah, I appreciate all your help and support with today's live stream. And yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, I don't see any further questions, so I will probably end the live stream. The only other thing I want to mention is the fact that we have a reflective writing workshop coming up on Thursday that you may be interested in. Let me just quickly get a link to that. But yeah, feel free to head off, Naomi, if you wanted to. It's entirely up to you. Let me just get the link to that workshop on Thursday, and then I'll end the stream.
I'm trying to work out how to head off, but I think I've worked it out now. I'll see everyone later.
See you later. Bye, Naomi. Cool. I've got Naomi now as a graphic as loading. But yes, I'll end the stream now. If anyone has any further questions, then you can email those questions to library@derby.ac.uk. If you are so interested in doing so. Or you could use our live chat function as well, which I will very briefly display. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming along to the live stream. I've enjoyed doing it, and I've enjoyed doing these live streams. So the live chat basically is the screen box at the bottom page of the any part of our library website. If you click on it, you can add your name, email address, and your question. If it's red, then that means that it's closed at the moment, but you can send a question in to it in advance, and then someone will get back to you the following day when the library's open. Or if it's the weekend, it may be the next working day of the library. But yeah, that is everything for the live stream. Thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Michael. If anyone has any other feedback, feel free to let us know. But yeah, I shall end the stream just here. And yeah. So I shall add the goodbye screen that I don't think I've actually used before. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Bye.